The night was quiet, the air heavy with silence, only broken by the soft hum of a lonely song. Inside a small home far away from the busy town, a mother sat by a wooden cradle. Her hands rested on the side of the cradle, rocking it slowly back and forth. Even though the cradle was empty, her voice carried a tune, a lullaby filled with pain, longing, and love. She sang each word as if her baby could still hear, as if the child was only sleeping and would wake at any moment. The cradle was small, carved with patterns of stars and moons, a gift from her family when her daughter was born. Now it stood as a reminder of what she had lost. The baby had been taken during the chaos of war, and no one had ever brought her back. Yet the mother could not stop singing. Her heart refused to let go every night. The song poured out like a prayer, rising into the darkness, carrying her hope into the cold sky. Neighbors sometimes walked by and heard her voice. They shook their heads and whispered, "She sings to nothing. She has lost her mind." But deep inside, the mother believed the song might travel. She believed her daughter, wherever she was, could still feel her love. It was the only thing that gave her the strength to live another day. Her room was dim, lit only by a small lamp on the table. The shadows on the wall stretched long and twisted as the flame flickered. Every corner of the house seemed to breathe sadness. On the table lay tiny clothes folded neatly, untouched since the day her daughter was taken. A small toy, a wooden rattle, rested beside them, silent and forgotten. The mother's eyes were tired, red from endless nights of tears, but when she sang, her voice became soft and full of warmth. Her lips trembled on the notes, yet she continued. The melody rose and fell. Wrapping the empty cradle in invisible arms, her heart ached, but still she sang. Because the cradle deserved a song, and the baby deserved to be remembered. Sometimes she closed her eyes and imagined her daughter lying there. She pictured the small hands reaching up, the bright eyes shining, the tiny mouth smiling. She imagined lifting her child, holding her close, feeling the warmth of life in her arms. But when she opened her eyes, there was only emptiness. The cradle rocked back and forth, the song fading into the silence. Outside, the wind howled softly, pressing against the windows. It was a cold night, colder than most, and the house seemed to shrink against the storm. The mother pulled her shawl tighter, her body thin from sleepless nights and little food. Still, she did not stop singing, for this song was not for her. It was for the baby who might still be alive somewhere. Her hope was small, but it burned like a candle refusing to die. The world around her had changed since the war. Families were broken, villages destroyed. Trust between people shattered. Humans and aliens had fought bitterly, leaving scars that time could not heal. Her people told stories of cruelty, of how the humans took what they wanted and left only pain. She had believed those stories until one day her baby was gone, and belief turned into reality. The song grew heavier, her voice breaking as memories returned. She remembered the day of fire, the screams, the smoke, the soldiers rushing into homes. She remembered holding her baby close, running to hide, but the chaos swallowed her, and in the blink of an eye, the child was gone. She searched for days, for weeks, for months, but found nothing except silence. Since then, the cradle became her only companion. Each night she rocked it as if the baby slept peacefully inside. Each night she sang as if her voice was a bridge across the stars. Neighbors had stopped visiting. Family stopped asking her to move on. They knew nothing could heal her heart except one thing, her daughter's return. The wind outside grew stronger. Rattling the windows, the lamp flickered. Threatening to go out still, she sang, her voice trembling but steady. Tears slid down her cheeks, glistening in the dim light. Her song filled the house, soft and sorrowful. A mother's endless prayer. Then suddenly there was a sound that did not belong to the song, nor to the wind. It was a knock, slow and heavy. On the wooden door, the mother froze, her voice breaking mid-note. Her hand stopped rocking the cradle. Her heart skipped a beat. The knock came again, louder this time. Her chest tightened. Fear and hope tangled inside her. No one visited her home at this hour. No one dared to disturb her nightly ritual. She rose slowly from the chair, her legs weak, her hands shaking. Step by step, she moved toward the door, the silence behind her now thick with suspense. Her fingers touched the handle, cold and rough under her skin. She hesitated, her breath shallow, her heart beating faster than it had in years. Was it a cruel neighbor, tired of her song, come to mock her again? Or was it something else, something unexplainable, something she had prayed for every night? The knock echoed once more. Shaking the quiet house, she swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "Who's there?" she asked, though her voice trembled with fear. No answer came, only the sound of the wind howling outside. She pulled the door open slowly, the wood creaking in protest, and there, standing in the doorway, was a figure she never expected to see. The cradle behind her stood empty, but the night was no longer silent. The story had changed, the song had reached someone, and the world, for the first time in years, was about to answer her prayers. The doorway stood open and the cold wind rushed inside. Carrying dust and silence, the mother blinked, her eyes wide, her body frozen in shock. Before her, in the dim light of the night, stood a human. His figure was tall, his clothes torn and dirty, his face tired. But what made her heart stop was not the human himself. It was what he carried in his arms, wrapped in a rough blanket. Held carefully against his chest was a small bundle. The human's arms cradled it gently, as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. The mother's lips trembled. Her voice caught in her throat. For one moment, she thought she was dreaming, her tired mind playing cruel tricks. But then she heard it, a soft cry, faint but real, the sound of a baby. Her knees weakened, and she gripped the doorframe for support. The human's eyes met hers, and in them, she saw no cruelty, no anger, only exhaustion and something deeper. Without speaking, he lifted the bundle slightly, letting the blanket fall just enough. The mother gasped, her breath stolen, her eyes filling with tears. The baby's face was there, small, fragile, alive, and so very familiar. "It cannot be," she whispered, her voice shaking like a fragile string. Her hands reached out but stopped in midair, afraid that touching would break the vision. The human spoke at last, his voice low and heavy, carrying both weariness and truth. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, holding the baby forward. Each word struck her heart like thunder, shaking her to the core. Her song still echoed faintly in the air, and now it seemed like the song itself had called this moment into being. She stepped closer, tears streaming down her face, her breath quick and shallow. The baby stirred in the human's arms, opening tiny eyes. The cradle behind her was no longer the only thing that carried memory. Now life had returned to her doorstep. Her daughter, stolen by war, stood once again within her reach. The mother gathered the child carefully into her trembling arms. The warmth of the small body filled her, melting the cold years of sorrow. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead, sobbing, rocking her gently. The empty cradle that haunted her nights was no longer a grave of memory. It would hold her baby again, alive and safe. But the human still stood in the doorway, silent, watching, his shoulders slumped, his face pale under the moonlight. He looked more like a traveler at the end of a long journey than a soldier or enemy. The mother glanced at him, her voice uneven, broken between joy and suspicion. Why would you do this?" she asked. "Why bring her back to me?" The human shifted, his hands rough and scarred. He leaned against the frame, his breathing heavy, as if each word cost him strength. "I found her," he said. "She was hidden in a camp. Forgotten, crying in the dark." He paused, looking at the child in her arms, his voice softer now. "I could not leave her. She was not mine. She was yours." The mother stared, her mind spinning. For years, she had been told that humans were merciless, that they would never show kindness. But here stood one, bruised, weary, holding nothing for himself, giving everything. She wanted to hate him, she wanted to scream, but her heart was chained by gratitude. Her baby was here because of him. The neighbors who had once mocked her song would not believe this. If they saw the human, they would shout, they would drive him away or worse. But the mother saw something different, something hidden behind his tired eyes. There was sorrow there, sorrow that matched her own. He had lost something too, and the act of returning her child was more than just mercy. The baby stirred again, letting out another soft cry. The mother rocked her, her lullaby rising once more. But now the song was filled with relief. The human listened quietly, his eyes lowering, as if the song pierced his own wounds. The mother noticed his body trembling, his leg bent strangely, a trail of blood seeping from a bandage. He was hurt, perhaps badly, yet he had still carried her daughter across the night. She whispered, her voice uncertain, "You are injured." The human gave a faint smile, though it was more pain than joy. "It is nothing," he said. "What matters is that she is home." But the weakness in his voice betrayed him. He leaned against the wall, struggling to stay on his feet. The mother stood torn, holding her child in one arm, looking at the man who had done the impossible. He was her enemy by blood and history, yet her savior by choice and action. Without him, her cradle would have remained empty forever. Her lips pressed to her baby's forehead once more. Then she looked at the human and whispered, "Come inside." The human hesitated, his eyes scanning the room, the cradle, the shadows. Perhaps he feared rejection. Perhaps he knew what danger awaited if others found him here. But finally, he stepped forward, each move heavy with exhaustion. The mother closed the door behind them, shutting out the storm. Inside, the song filled the house once more, but now it carried hope. The cradle, once a symbol of sorrow, was ready to hold life again. The human lowered himself slowly onto a chair, his body trembling. The mother placed her baby in the cradle, watching as the child settled peacefully. The silence that followed was not empty anymore. It was full of breath, of warmth, of new beginnings, yet, under this fragile peace, 1,000 questions remained. Who was this human, truly? And why had he risked his life to return her child? What had he lost that made him understand her pain? And what danger would follow him into her house? The mother's heart was full, but the night's mystery was only beginning. The baby slept softly in the cradle, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. The mother sat close, her hand resting on the wooden edge, afraid to look away. Afraid this moment might vanish like smoke. Across the room, the human sat slouched in the chair, his eyes half closed, his wounds still fresh, his body weak from the long journey. The fire in the corner burned low, filling the house with dim light and the smell of smoke. The silence between them grew heavy, and in that silence memories began to rise, pulling her back to the days she tried so hard to forget. She remembered the war, the first night the sky split apart with fire. Ships roared above the villages, casting shadows that swallowed the land. Explosions tore through the streets and soldiers flooded every doorway. The mother had clutched her baby tight, whispering promises that she would keep her safe. But war does not listen to promises, and hope is small against the sound of guns. She remembered the panic, the screams of her neighbors, the smoke that burned her throat. She remembered running, searching for a place to hide, every step trembling with fear. She remembered the moment the door of her home broke open, soldiers rushing inside. In the chaos, her arms were torn from her child. The cry of her daughter ripped through the air. By the time she turned, by the time she screamed, the baby was gone, lost in the storm of war. For weeks, she searched the ruins, her feet bleeding, her voice raw from calling out her daughter's name. She searched the camps, she searched the broken streets, she asked everyone she met, but no one answered. The world had become a place of ash and silence, and her baby had vanished into it. Her family told her to stop, her friends begged her to rest, but she refused. Her heart could not accept the truth, and so she kept looking, even when her body gave out. When hope finally crumbled, she returned home. The cradle stood waiting, still and empty. She placed her hand on it and swore she would never forget. From that night on, she sang night after night, letting her voice carry into the darkness. Her neighbors thought her broken, but to her, it was the only way to keep her daughter alive in spirit. Now, with her child returned, the memories felt sharper than ever. She looked at the human sitting in her house and her heart twisted. This man was part of the same race she had been taught to fear, the same race that had taken everything. Her people had whispered stories of cruelty, of children stolen and villages burned. And yet this man had crossed fire and danger to bring back the very life they had stolen. She studied him, his face lined with exhaustion, his eyes shadowed with sorrow. He was not a monster, not the way her people had painted humans, but there was pain in him, deep and hidden, the kind that comes only from loss. The baby stirred in her sleep, a soft whimper rising, and the human lifted his head. For a moment, his expression softened as if the sight of the child eased a wound inside his heart. The mother's voice broke the silence. "Why her?" she asked quietly. "Why bring her back when others would not?" The human took a long breath, his gaze fixed on the fire. "Because I know what it is to lose," he said at last, his words low and heavy. I had a family once, a daughter of my own. She was taken from me in the war. His voice cracked, and for a moment, the mask of strength fell, revealing the grief beneath. The mother felt her chest tighten, her anger softening into something more complicated. This man was not her enemy, not truly. He was another parent torn apart by the same fire. They sat in silence again, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two souls who had walked through the same pain. Outside, the wind pressed against the house, rattling the shutters. The night seemed endless, but inside something had shifted. The cradle was no longer empty. The song was no longer only sorrow. The mother knew the war had left scars that might never heal, but here, in this small home, there was proof that kindness could survive even in the ruins. She leaned closer to the cradle, brushing her daughter's hair with trembling fingers. The human watched her, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes heavy but thoughtful. Neither spoke, but both knew this moment was fragile, like glass that could break with a single wrong move. The mother wondered what tomorrow would bring. When her neighbors learned a human had stepped into her house, would they see him as a savior or as an enemy to be driven away? For now, none of that mattered. The war had taken much, but tonight it had given back something she thought was lost forever. Her daughter breathed softly, alive and safe, and across the room the human sat, broken but unyielding, the proof that even in war, there were those who chose mercy. The mother closed her eyes, her voice trembling as she whispered another song, this time not of sorrow but of fragile hope. The fire crackled, the baby stirred, and the night carried their silence into the darkness. The memories of war still burned inside them, but for the first time, there was something stronger, something that might change everything, if only they had the courage to protect it. The night dragged on, heavy and restless. The baby slept in the cradle, her tiny breaths filling the room with a rhythm that sounded like peace. The mother sat close, never letting her eyes wander far, afraid that if she looked away the child might vanish again. The human remained in the chair, his body weak, his wounds still bleeding slowly, but his eyes stayed sharp, watching the flames of the fire. The silence between them was filled with questions, questions the mother could no longer keep inside. At last her voice broke the stillness, soft but edged with fear. "Tell me," she whispered, "how did you find her? Why did you risk so much for a child who is not yours?" The human leaned back, his head tilting as if the weight of memory pressed down on him. His lips parted, and for the first time his story began to unfold. "I was a soldier," he said, his voice rough, as if each word scraped his throat. "I followed orders. I marched with my unit. I saw villages burn. I saw children taken. I saw families torn apart." His hands clenched into fists, the knuckles white. "But one night, I entered a camp, a dark place filled with shadows, and I heard crying." His eyes shifted to the cradle, his voice breaking. "It was her, your daughter, hidden in a corner like something forgotten." The mother's breath caught, her heart racing. She imagined her baby lying in the dirt, hungry, cold, and alone. Her stomach turned, and her arms tightened around herself. As if to shield her child from the memory, the human lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his face. "I could not leave her," he continued, "not when I had already lost my own." The mother's eyes widened. "Your own?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "My daughter was taken by war too," he said. "Different faces, different uniforms, but the same cruelty." His voice grew quieter, heavy with sorrow. "When I looked at your child, I saw mine, I saw what I could not save, and I swore I would not fail again." Tears slipped down the mother's cheeks. Her anger toward him clashed with the truth of his pain. He was her enemy, yet his grief mirrored her own. Her voice was shaky as she asked, "Did you raise her? Did you care for her all this time?" The human nodded, his eyes glistening. "I kept her fed. I carried her across miles of ruined ground. I hid her from soldiers, from raiders, from beasts in the dark. He leaned forward, his face pale. Every step I thought I would fall, but every time she cried I found strength. The mother's heart wavered. She imagined this man, her sworn enemy, walking through dangerous lands with her baby pressed to his chest. She saw the blood on his clothes, the scars on his skin, the weakness in his body now, and she knew he had suffered more than he admitted. Without him, her daughter would never have returned, but fear lingered in her chest. "What if others come searching for you?" she asked. "What if danger follows you to my door?" The human's expression darkened, his jaw set with grim resolve. "They will not," he said, though his voice carried doubt. "I left my unit. I deserted. To them I am already dead. If they find me, they will kill me." The words chilled the room, the mother's breath unsteady. This man had not only saved her child, he had betrayed his own people to do it. He had turned his back on the war, knowing the cost. The firelight flickered across his face, showing both strength and weakness, both guilt and hope. The mother stared at him, her heart torn between fear and gratitude. Her baby stirred, letting out a small cry. The mother rushed to lift her, rocking her gently, her song rising once more. The human listened, his eyes softening, his hand trembling against his knee. "That song," he murmured. "I heard it in the camp the night I found her. I thought it was a dream, but she calmed when I hummed it." The mother's eyes widened, her voice breaking. She remembers, for the first time in years, the song that once belonged only to grief now carried connection. The baby knew it, the human had carried it, and now the three of them shared it. The mother wiped her tears, her heart heavy but full. She turned to the human, her voice steadier now. "You did not just bring her back, you saved her soul." The human lowered his head. Unable to meet her eyes, the fire crackled, the wind howled against the windows. But inside the small house, truth had broken the silence. The mother no longer saw a faceless enemy. She saw a man who had lost as she had lost, who had fought against the cruelty of his own kind. The weight of the past still lingered, but something new had begun to grow. Trust, fragile as glass but real. She placed her daughter gently in the cradle, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. Then she looked at the human again, his body trembling with exhaustion, his wounds deep, his spirit scarred. "Rest," she whispered. "You are safe here. For tonight." The human closed his eyes, his shoulders lowering as if the words lifted a burden. And for the first time in years, the house felt alive, filled not with sorrow, but with the faint light of truth. Yet beyond the walls, the world was still broken. The war had not ended, enemies still roamed the land, and danger was never far. The mother knew this peace was fragile, perhaps only a spark in the storm, but as she sang to her child and the human listened, something inside her whispered, this was not the end of their story. This was only the beginning. The fire burned lower, its glow painting the walls in soft gold. The baby lay in the cradle, her tiny fingers curling and uncurling as she dreamed. The mother hummed quietly, her song floating like a gentle breeze through the room. The human listened, his head resting against the chair, his eyes heavy but his heart awake. The song seemed to reach him, not just through his ears, but deep inside the hollow space of his chest. The baby stirred, a small cry rising. The mother leaned over, her hand brushing gently across the child's face, her voice growing stronger as she sang. The cry faded, replaced by soft breathing, the little girl sinking back into sleep. The human's lips trembled, and before he could stop himself, he whispered, "She knows your song." The mother turned, her eyes shining. She always knew, even when she was far. She carried it with her. For a long moment, they both listened to the baby's breathing. The mother's song filled the silence. Warm and tender, the human's eyes closed, but his hand tapped lightly on his knee as if trying to follow the rhythm. He whispered again, almost to himself. "When I carried her, I hummed this tune. I did not know the words, but it kept her calm." The mother's heart clenched, her tears rising once more. "You gave her what I could not. You gave her comfort when I was not there." She reached across the table, placing a trembling hand near his, not touching but close. "You carried her," she said softly, "not just in your arms, but in your heart." The human swallowed hard, his face pale in the firelight. "She saved me too," he admitted. "When I had nothing left." "When the world was nothing but smoke and blood, she gave me a reason to keep walking." His eyes glistened, his voice low. Every time I wanted to fall, her cry reminded me I could not. The mother felt a strange warmth in her chest. This man, once her enemy, had become a guardian in her absence. The war had taken everything from both of them, yet it had also tied their fates together through this child. She began to sing again, louder now, letting the melody fill every corner of the house. The human lifted his head, his lips parting, and to her surprise he began to hum along. His voice was rough, broken, but steady. It was not the song of her people, not sung with her words, but it carried the same rhythm, the same heart. The baby shifted in the cradle, her little fingers reaching upward, as if she could feel the harmony. The mother's breath caught in her throat, her tears slipping freely. This was no longer just her song, it had become their song, bound by sorrow, bound by love, bound by survival. When the song ended, the silence was not empty, it was alive. The fire cracked, the baby sighed, and for a moment the war outside seemed far away. The mother looked at the human, her voice low but certain. You are part of her life now, whether you wish it or not. The human lowered his gaze, his hands trembling. I am not sure your people will allow that. The mother's eyes hardened, her voice firm. Then they will have to face me, because she would not be alive without you. The human leaned back, exhaustion pulling at his body, but there was something softer in his expression now, a flicker of peace he had not felt in years. He watched the mother lift her baby, holding her close, rocking her gently as she sang again. Her voice wrapped around both child and man, carrying not just grief but gratitude. The human's shoulders lowered, the tension in his jaw easing, as if her song had reached the parts of him he thought long dead. But under the warmth, shadows still lingered. The mother noticed the blood on his bandage, darker now, spreading slowly. She frowned, worry tightening her chest. You are still bleeding, she said firmly. The human waved a hand weakly. It is nothing. I have survived worse, but his face was pale, his body trembling, his strength fading without hesitation. The mother laid her baby back in the cradle. She hurried to fetch clean cloth and a small jar of healing herbs, the simple remedies of her people. The human tried to protest, but his voice failed him. She knelt beside him, gently unwrapping the bandage, her hand steady though her heart raced. The wound was deep, jagged, the mark of a blade, but she did not flinch. You carried my child through fire and death, she whispered. The least I can do is carry your pain tonight. The human's eyes closed, his breath shaky for the first time in years. Someone was caring for him, not as a soldier, not as an enemy, but as a man. The mother pressed the herbs into the wound. Binding it with fresh cloth, her song rose again, soft and steady. Not for the baby this time, but for him. His body relaxed. His breathing slowed, his eyes wet with silent tears. He whispered, Your song. It heals more than wounds. The mother did not answer, but her heart swelled with something she could not name. In that small home, 3 lives touched, their souls bound by a melody born of sorrow and carried into hope. The cradle rocked gently. The baby sighed in her sleep. The fire burned low, and the song lingered in the air. The war outside still raged, enemies still hunted, danger still waited in the shadows, but tonight, in this single room, there was peace, fragile yet real. The bond of song had been formed, and it was stronger than hate, stronger than war, stronger than fear. The mother knew this was only the beginning of a path filled with trials. But as she looked at her baby and the human who had saved her, she believed they could face whatever came. Together. The morning came slowly, the first rays of light slipping through the cracks of the wooden shutters. The baby stirred in the cradle, her soft cry breaking the silence of dawn. The mother rushed to her side, lifting her gently, rocking her in her arms, her lips pressing against the child's forehead. Across the room, the human still slept in the chair, his body slumped, his face pale, his wound wrapped tightly with fresh bandages. For a moment, the house felt safe, filled only with the sound of a mother's song and the soft breath of a sleeping man. But safety was fragile, and peace was never meant to last in a world broken by war. By mid-morning, the whispers began. Neighbors who had seen shadows moving near the mother's home the night before gathered in the narrow street. They spoke in low voices, suspicion sharp in every word. Did you hear? One muttered. A human walked into her house. The rumors spread quickly. Like fire on dry grass, some claimed the man was a spy, sent to trick her, sent to trick them all. Others whispered that no human could be trusted. not after the pain they had caused. A few, quieter than the rest, wondered if the story was true, if a human had really brought back her child, but doubt always drowned hope, and soon the whispers grew louder, harsher, filled with fear and anger. Inside, the mother heard the voices through the walls. Her chest tightened, her arms holding her baby closer. She looked at the human who had woken now, his eyes heavy with the weight of the world. "They will not understand," he said softly, his voice low. "To them, I am the enemy. No matter what I have done." The mother's jaw tightened, her voice steady. "Then they will have to face me. Because you returned what no one else could." The human shook his head, his face grim. "They will not see mercy. They will only see betrayal if they find me here. They will punish you too." The mother's heart ached, torn between fear for herself, fear for her child, and gratitude for the man before her. She thought of the nights she had sung to an empty cradle, the endless sorrow she had carried. Now her baby was back, alive, breathing, smiling, and it was because of him. By afternoon, the whispers became knocks. 3 elders from the village arrived, their faces stern, their voices cold. They demanded to know the truth, demanded to know if the rumors were real. The mother stood in the doorway, her baby in her arms, her eyes burning with fire. "Yes," she said boldly, "a human came, and he returned my daughter to me." The elders exchanged looks, their mouths tight with anger. One spat on the ground. "He is no savior, he is a curse, he will bring soldiers to our doors." Another pointed at her, his voice sharp. "By letting him inside, you endanger us all." The mother's grip on her child tightened, her heart pounding, but she did not move. Her voice rang out, trembling yet unbroken. "Without him, my cradle would still be empty. Without him, my daughter would be dead." The words fell heavy in the air. The crowd behind the elders muttered, some agreeing, others shaking their heads in fury. The mother's eyes flashed with defiance. "If any of you had found her, if any of you had risked the fire of war, she might be home sooner, but none of you did." "He did." The silence that followed cut deeper than any blade. The elders faltered, but their pride held them. Inside the house, the human sat quietly, hearing every word. His hand rested on his knee, his jaw clenched, ready to rise if they forced their way in. But his heart twisted at the sight of the mother fighting for him, defending him against her own people. It was something he had not known in years. Someone seeing him not as a weapon, not as an enemy, but as a man. For the first time since he had lost his daughter, he felt he still had worth. The baby whimpered, and the mother hushed her, pressing her cheek to the child's soft hair. Her voice softened but carried strength. "He is wounded, he is broken, but he gave back what I thought lost forever. If you call him enemy, then what am I? Because I owe him my life." The crowd stirred. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. They could not deny the truth of her words, yet their fear was stronger than reason. One finally growled, "Keep him hidden. But if he brings danger, it will be your fault." With that, they turned, the crowd dispersing slowly, their voices still sharp with doubt. The mother closed the door, her back pressing against it, her breath trembling. The human rose weakly, his face filled with guilt. "You should not have done that. They will hate you for it." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "Let them hate me. I will not throw away the man who gave me my child back." Her voice softened then, her shoulders lowering. "Do you not see? You are part of her story now, you are part of mine." The human looked at her, his throat tight, his heart heavier than words could carry. He wanted to speak, but the song returned, rising from the mother's lips, the same lullaby she had sung in sorrow, now stronger, now braver, filling the room with hope. The baby reached her tiny hand toward the sound, her eyes fluttering open, her mouth curling into the smallest smile. The human's chest ached, tears burning his eyes, as he realized the truth. He was no longer just a stranger. He was tied to them by something stronger than blood. That night, the voices outside faded, but danger still lingered beyond the walls. The mother knew her choice would bring consequences, but she did not regret it. The human knew he had no home left but here, no life left but this bond. The baby slept, safe in her cradle, while the mother and the human sat close, silent but unbroken. And in the silence, the bond between enemies deepened, becoming something neither war nor hate could destroy. The night returned, deep and silent, the stars hidden behind heavy clouds. Inside the small house, the fire burned low, shadows dancing across the walls like restless spirits. The baby slept in the cradle, her face calm, her tiny fist tucked close to her chest. The mother sat nearby, her eyes fixed on the flames, her thoughts heavy with what had happened that day. Across from her, the human rested, his wound bound but his spirit far from healed. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. The mother finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. They will not forgive me for this. They will not forgive me for keeping you here. The human lifted his head, his eyes dark with sorrow. You should not bear that weight. Not for me, he whispered. The mother shook her head, her arms wrapping around herself as if to hold in the storm. You carried my child when I could not. You gave her life when I had lost all hope. How can I cast you aside now? The human lowered his gaze, his jaw tight, his voice trembling with hidden grief. I am not a savior, he said. I am a broken man. I could not save my own family. I failed them. And every day I carry that failure. The mother's eyes softened, her heart aching. And yet you chose to save mine. Perhaps that is how you carry them still. The fire crackled. Filling the silence that followed, the baby stirred in the cradle, a soft cry slipping from her lips. The mother lifted her, pressing the child against her chest, swaying gently as her song rose once more. The human closed his eyes listening, the melody wrapping around him like a cloak. He whispered, that song, it makes me believe there is something beyond war. The mother looked at him, her voice quiet but fierce. There is, but only if we choose it. Only if we are brave enough to see the enemy as human. The words lingered, heavy and fragile. The human lifted his head, meeting her gaze, and for the first time, there was no wall between them, only two souls scarred by the same fire, holding on to the same fragile light. The baby's small hand reached toward the human, her eyes half open, her soft coo breaking the tension. The mother stepped closer, lowering the child into his arms. He froze, his breath caught, his hands trembling as he accepted the weight of the baby. The child nestled against him, her tiny face pressing into his chest, her warmth sinking into the emptiness of his heart. Tears filled his eyes, spilling down his scarred cheeks. The mother watched, her own tears shining, her voice breaking. She knows you, she trusts you, she feels the bond you gave her. The human held the child tighter, his chest rising and falling with sobs he could no longer hide. For years he had carried only guilt, only pain, but now in his arms, there was forgiveness, there was hope. It was as if the child herself was healing wounds no medicine could touch. The door rattled suddenly, the wind howling outside. Both the mother and the human looked up, their hearts pounding. For a moment fear returned, fear that soldiers or angry neighbors had come to tear this fragile piece apart. But the sound faded, only the storm outside, only the night reminding them that danger never slept. The human lowered his head, whispering, they will never accept me, not here, not anywhere. The mother stepped closer, her hand resting on his shoulder, firm and steady. Then stay where you are accepted, she said, her voice clear. Stay here with us. The human's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across his face. You would take me in knowing what I am, knowing what your people think of me. The mother nodded, her voice filled with quiet strength. I know what you are. A man who chose mercy when the world chose hate. The words sank deep into him, breaking the chains of shame he had carried for so long. He looked at the child in his arms, then at the mother, and for the first time in years, he felt something he thought was lost forever. He felt home. The baby cooed again, her tiny hand gripping his finger, sealing the choice without words. The mother smiled softly, her eyes wet. You are part of our story now. Whether the world accepts it or not, the fire burned lower, the storm raged outside, but inside there was peace, fragile but real. The mother sat beside the human, their shoulders close, their hearts no longer divided by fear. The baby slept between them, safe and warm, the bond of song and sacrifice tying them together stronger than blood. For the first time in years, the mother's song was not one of sorrow, but of hope, and for the first time in years, the human believed that peace, even between enemies, was possible. The night stretched on, but the darkness no longer felt endless. The cradle was no longer empty. The house was no longer silent. It was filled with breath, with warmth, with a new beginning. The war outside might continue, enemies might still hate, danger might still knock at their door, but within these walls they had chosen something greater, something stronger, something worth fighting for. Humanity had been found in the enemy, And in that fragile truth their story truly began.